6.3 is on the quadratic formula. You're going to like this once we finally get to the quadratic formula. In fact, some of you are going to say to me, why didn't you just teach us the quadratic formula and then we didn't need to learn all that other stuff about factoring and square root method and completing the square. But anyway, let's do this. So as you can see right here, I have a quadratic equation written in general form. Right, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And before, a bunch of videos ago in the previous chapter, we took something that looked like this, quadratic function in general form, and we completed the square on this. Do you remember this? We had all these x's and a's and b's and all over the place. Well, now we're going to do the same sort of thing, but this time we're not going to do a quadratic function, we're going to do a quadratic equation. So what we're going to do is we're going to complete the square of this. It's going to be a little complicated, but when we get our final result, it's going to be very, very useful. So let's go for it. So the first thing we do with completing the square, remember it's, can anybody make fudge cake? And when we complete the square with the quadratic equation, remember we don't do that last step. Okay, the c is constant. So here's the constant, the c, we're going to move it to the other side. So ax squared plus bx equals negative c. Done. A stands for a value. There's the a value. The a value is a, and we have to factor that out. So we take out the a, and what we're left with is x squared, because a times x squared is ax squared, plus, this is a little confusing, we did this last time, b over a x equals negative c. Do you understand why it's b over ax? If you multiply a times b over a, the a's would cancel, you'd be left with bx, and that's what we had right there. Okay, so that's done. The magic number. To get the magic number, we take the coefficient in front of the x, so that's b over a. We divide it by 2, I'll write it this way, and we square it. Okay, 2 is the same as 2 over 1, so that's going to be b over a times, right, when you divide fractions, you actually want to multiply by the reciprocal, so 1 over 2, and then we square that. So b times 1 is b, a times 2 is 2a, and we square that. Going to spread the love, spread that 2 to everything. So we have b squared, we have 2 squared, which is 4, and we have a squared. That's your magic number. So on the left-hand side, in order to make this a perfect square trinomial, we're going to put that magic number right here. So we're going to put plus b squared over 4a squared. On the other side, negative c plus, are we going to put that right there? No, we're not. Remember, this b squared over 4a squared is actually being multiplied by a. So that's what we have to do to the magic number here. We have to multiply it by a. And if you multiply by a, this a and one of these a's cancels out. So you're just left with b squared over 4a. And that's what you're going to add on this side. B squared over 4a. And we've done this step. Next step is to factor this. So a, and then we're going to get something squared here, right? X, because x times x is x squared, plus, remember how to do this? You can take the square root of all of this. Well, the square root of b squared is b, and the square root of 4a squared is 2a, so you could do it that way. Or the other way you could do it is you could take half of b over a. That's exactly what we did here. We took half of b over a, and we got b over 2a, so that should be the same thing, b over 2a. Alright, on the other side, let's combine these. Let's make a common denominator. So the common denominator is obviously 4a. You have to multiply top and bottom here by 4a. So when you multiply the top by 4a, you get negative 4ac, and then we have our plus b squared. Great. We've kind of finished completing the square, but now we have to do is slip into the square root method. So we're going to try to isolate the squared amount. So here's our squared amount right here. This is all squared. The a is not squared, so we have to get rid of that a from this side. How are we going to do that? We're going to divide by a and divide by a on this side. So if you divide by a, what you're left with on the left is x plus b over 2a all squared. And on the right, you have, okay, maybe there's a different way I could draw this. If I'm dividing by a, which is a over 1, that's the same as multiplying by 1 over a, right? So when I multiply by 1 over a, the numerator stays exactly the same, negative 4ac plus b squared, But the bottom is now going to be 4a times a is 4a squared. Okay, we've managed to isolate the squared part. It's time to take the square root of both sides. Aren't you loving this? Don't forget to put plus minus on this one. So if we take the square root of this side, we get x plus b over 2a. And if we take the square root of this, we could take the square root of the top and take the square root of the bottom. Well, the square root of the top doesn't work out too well, so let's just leave it as plus or minus the square root of negative 4ac plus b squared. But the bottom you can take the square root of. The square root of 4a squared is 2a. Great, we're almost done. Next thing we can do is we can move this b over 2a to the other side. We want to isolate the x, right? So this comes over and becomes negative b over 2a plus or minus. Now, the bottom here is still going to be 2a, of course. For the top, let's just rewrite this in a different order. Rather than having negative 4ac plus b squared, let's put b squared, the positive b squared, take away 4ac. It's no different. We just change the order. And we're more or less done. But look, they both have the same denominator, so we could put them both over the same denominator. And this is our final answer right here. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. All of that is the quadratic formula. Now, if you followed everything I did here, awesome, way to go. That's really impressive. If you didn't, it's not really a big deal, because here's really all you need to know. The solutions of the quadratic equation ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 are given by, in other words, if you want to know what value of x or values of x you could put in here in these two spots to make this left side equal 0, you can always get the answer by using x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. And there's a little video that I will watch with you in class. It's a terrible video. I'm putting the link right here. You can go watch it now if you want. But we're going to watch it in class twice. And even though it's a horrible video, low quality, kind of annoying, when you watch it twice, I promise you'll memorize the quadratic formula for the rest of your life. I don't know why, but it works. And the tune to this song goes x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a, and that's going to be stuck in your head. And you always remember it, so it's great. Okay, so let's solve a couple quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. Here's a quadratic equation, and it's already equal to 0. That's great, because it has to be equal to 0 in order to use the quadratic formula. Now all you need to do is be able to realize what a is equal to, b is equal to, and c is equal to. That's no problem, is it? A is in front of x squared. Well, what's in front of x squared? 1. B is in front of x. That's a 4. C is the constant. That's negative 1. Now we're just going to plug those numbers in here. So we get x equals negative b, which is negative 4, plus or minus square root b squared, so that's 4 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 1, divided by 2 times a, which is 1. And you just do your multiplying, your adding, all that kind of stuff, and you get your answer. Negative 4 plus or minus square root 4 squared is 16 minus, okay, be careful here, 4 times 1 is 4, times negative 1 is negative 4. This is going to happen a lot where you get negative, take away a negative. All divided by 2. X equals negative 4 plus or minus square root 16, take away negative 4 is 20, because that becomes a plus, all over 2. It's a good answer, but I'd like you to do better than that. Why? Because we can simplify the 20, right? Root 20 can be simplified. Let's do our tree. 20 is 4 and 5, and 4 is 2 and 2. We need a pair, and we have a pair right there. So 20, root 20 I guess, is the same as 2, that comes out, and the 5 stays in. So we have x equals negative 4 plus or minus 2 root 5, instead of 20, put 2 root 5, all over 2. Guess what? There's one more thing we can do. You might remember this from before. Since we can divide the first term by 2 and the second term by 2, we can do that. If you could only divide one of them by 2, it wouldn't work. If this was 7 here instead of 2, you couldn't do it, because you couldn't divide 7 by 2. But we can divide both of these by 2, so we do that. And what we end up with is x equals negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2 plus or minus 2 divided by 2 is 1, but you don't even need to put it, root 5. There's our answer. x equals negative 2 plus or minus root 5. How many answers is this? How many solutions? Or how many roots is this? 2 roots here, negative 2 plus root 5 and negative 2 minus root 5. All right, let's do another one. This one as well is already in the correct form, so we just have to pick out our a, our b, and our c. A equals 3, b is negative 4, c is 5. And happily we go plugging in numbers. X equals negative b, so that's negative negative 4, which makes positive 4, plus or minus square root b squared, so that's negative 4 all squared, be careful with that, b squared minus 4a, which is 3, c, which is 5, divided by, but what I say is all divided by, because otherwise people sometimes forget and they only put the divided sign like that, and if you do that, believe it or not, it's wrong. It has to go all the way over to there. So I actually say x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. I know the all is not very musical, but I gotta throw it in there. Okay, on the bottom is 2a, so 2 times 3. X equals 4 plus or minus square root negative 4 squared is 16 minus 4 times 3 is 12 times 5 is 60. Divided by 6. X equals 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 44. All divided by 6. Let's stop and think for a second here. What seems strange here? What seems strange here is this, square root of a negative number. You can't do it. There is no solution to this question. There is no value of x that you can plug in right here and here to get the left-hand side equal to 0. Okay, now the only thing different for these last, how many I got here, last two, is they're not in the form we want. We want them to be in general form, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So what do you think you're going to have to do? Well, you're going to have to move everything to one side, and you're going to have to expand this side. Let's just leave the 2x here for now, and let's multiply. Now, when you multiply three things like this, what I often find people do is they multiply 3 times x and 3 times negative 1, and they also multiply 3 times this and 3 times, no, that's not right. If I was multiplying three numbers together, if I was multiplying 2 times 3 times 4, I don't go 2 times 3 and 2 times 4. I go 2 times 3 and get an answer and multiply that answer by 4. Or, since order doesn't matter, I could do 3 times 4 and then multiply by 2. Or, since order doesn't matter, I could do 2 times 4 and then multiply by 3. It doesn't matter the order you do them in, but don't multiply 3 times this and 3 times that. So why don't we multiply, let's multiply these two together. So what we have is 3, and then we have x times x, right? We have to do mountains and valleys here. So x times x is x squared. X times positive 1 is x, and negative 1 times x is negative x. Positive x, negative x. They cancel. And then negative 1 times positive 1 is negative 1. Okay? Now we can do mountains here. So we end up with 2x equals 3 times x squared is 3x squared, and 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. Great, we're almost in this form now. We want it equal to 0. You're probably going to move the 2x over because I've drilled into your head to always keep this coefficient, the leading coefficient, positive. With the quadratic formula, it really doesn't matter, but I still like to follow that rule. So I'm going to leave that there. 3x squared, make sure you put it in the right order, right? First the x squareds, then the x's, so you should have minus 2x, and then minus 3. And we're on our way. A equals 3, b equals negative 2. You don't have to write these down like on a test or something. Just doing it so you're clear how I'm getting my answer. X equals negative b, so negative negative 2 is positive 2, plus or minus square root b squared, so it's negative 2 squared, minus 4a, that's 3c, negative 3, all divided by 2a. So x equals 2 plus or minus square root negative 2 squared is 4 minus 4 times 3 is 12 times negative 3 is negative 36 all over 6. X equals 2 plus or minus square root 4 take away negative 36 is 40 all over 6. Looks good, not quite finished. How come? Because we want to simplify this 40. That's square root of 40. So 40 is 8 and 5. 8 is 4 and 2. 4 is 2 and 2. We need a pair. There's a pair. So that comes out, and what's left inside is the 2 and the 5. 2 times 5 is 10. So x equals 2 plus or minus 2 root 10 all over 6. Are we finished? Actually, we can do one more step, can't we? This 2 and this 2 and this 6 can all be divided by 2. So what you end up with is x equals, this will become a 1, and yes, you do have to put that 1. You can't just make it disappear, otherwise it'd be a 0. But if you divide 2 by 2, you get 1, plus or minus 1 root 10 all over 3. I divided this by 2 and got 1. I divided this by 2 and got 1. I divided this by 2 and got 3. So 1 plus or minus root 10 all over 3 are our two solutions. Last one. Boy, we have a square root sign in here. That doesn't look anything like this. So guess what you're going to have to do? Isolate the square root. It already is isolated. And square both sides. We've got to get rid of that. So the square root of x plus 3 squared is x plus 3. And on the other side, we have 2x minus 1 squared, which means 2x minus 1 times 2x minus 1. You can't spread the love when it's a binomial, right? Okay, so let's keep the x plus 3 over here, and let's do mountains and valleys on this side. 2x times 2x is 4x squared. 2x times negative 1 is negative 2x. And negative 1 times 2x is another negative 2x. So negative 2x and another negative 2x makes negative 4x. Negative 1 times negative 1 is plus 1. Let's get everything to one side. I'd like to move these ones over, so I'm subtracting x from both sides, and I'm subtracting 3 from both sides. That's a 3. So we have nothing left over here. 4x squared. Negative 4x take away another x is negative 5x. 1 take away 3 is negative 2. It's now in the correct form. Pick out my a, my b, and my c. A is 4, b is negative 5, c is negative 2, and away we go. X equals negative b, so it's negative negative 5, which is 5, plus or minus square root b squared. So let's skip a step here. B squared, that's negative 5 squared, which is 25, minus 4ac is negative 2, divided by 2a. 2 times 4 is 8. X equals 5 plus or minus square root of 25. Take away 4 times 4 is 16, times negative 2 is negative 32 all over 8. And at last, I think this is it, x equals 5 plus or minus square root 25. Take away negative 32 is the same as plus, so we're 57 divided by 8. Do you see something? See what I did wrong? This will be very common. People will do this. It's not right. It has to be like that. Otherwise, you're saying you have 5 here instead of 5 over 8. So remember, it's all divided by 2a. 57. Can we simplify root 57? 57 is 3 and 19, right? Yes, and those are both prime, no pair. So this is it. We are finished. There's our two solutions. One solution is 5 plus root 57 over 8. The other solution is 5 minus root 57 over 8. What I like to do is move this 8 so it's right in the middle. It's more appealing visually. Alright, I hope you enjoy the quadratic formula, and make sure you watch that video 2 times. We'll watch it in class so you don't have to.
Gotta get down to it. So